the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua, once again. And this topic today, and the question today is quite familiar for all of you guys. It's of course familiar, right? The question today is, how can podcasting be a game changer for your business visibility and networking? Well, our guest is the man, the veteran, the person to answer that question with us today. Bruce Wozniak is the founder and president of Now Hear This, a PR agency that serves a diverse range of clients across the United States. With over 10 years of podcasting experience, he has hosted 875 episodes of the Now Hear This entertainment podcast, never missing a weekly release since its inception in February 2014. Wow. Bruce is also a sought after national speaker and has published an ebook series derived from his podcast. His extensive experience in PR, podcasting, and public speaking has significantly expanded his network and visibility. Bruce's expertise spans indie music artists, authors, entrepreneurs, and actors. And today, Bruce is going to share his extensive experience. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a veteran and a titan of the podcasting industry, and I am super honored and glad to have him here on the show today. Bruce, thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
My pleasure, Joshua. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's fantastic. I mean, there's a lot I'd love to unravel here right now. But Bruce, you founded Now Hear This is it was almost a side hustle 20 years ago, if I read that correctly as well. Um, First off, can you start what inspired you to do Now Hear This and how it served from serving local clients in Tampa to having a nationwide presence? How did that come about? How did it evolve to the giant that it is now?
Well, when I first founded Now Hear This, it was born out of just a kind gesture that I wanted to
Mm.
do for someone. There was a singer that I would see in church every Sunday. I thought she was really great. I thought more people need to hear this girl. She has such a great voice. And I
Wow.
just approached her one Sunday before leaving church to say, do you ever sing outside of church? More people should hear you. Yeah, I do from time to time, some fairs, festivals, community events, things like that. And I said, well, if there's ever anything you're singing at, I'd love to come and hear you do something other than worship music, which I love, but I'd love to hear you do secular music. And, if there's any way I could help you out, I just think you're so talented. She thanked me, but at the same time, she was kind of pushing me away and saying like, okay, fella, thank you. And I would kind of from time to time remind her, like, I
Mhm.
think you're great. And I just want to help you because more people need to see how talented you are. And she
Mhm.
said, well, my dad already helps me. And that was kind
Mhm.
of a polite way of saying no and
Stop.
stop asking me. And I think it became a case of going home and telling dad, this guy is, you know, I think Joshua, they weren't understanding that I was trying to do this voluntarily. I wasn't
Mhm.
asking for money. And so
Mhm.
that went from he's not asking for money to the dad was a realtor that what do I know about any of this stuff? Here's this guy that has this background because I had worked
Right.
in the National Hockey League. I was starting into a job in the Olympic movement. So my whole background had been in promoting. And so I
Mhm.
think they saw that and said, well, let's give him a chance. And I started getting results for her. And
Wow.
then the light went on in my head that, okay, I'm just kind of doing this on the side, but I can do this,
For everyone,
as a
for
business.
anybody. There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
I love it. I love how it started at first, just like, I mean, please stop talking to me. Like, I probably don't need your help. Of course, like you said, they have no idea what it is you were actually trying to do and what you were actually capable of. On at such a large scale, and you probably also didn't realize it then. But then, right after that, you were like, "Whoa, boom! This is it. This is doable. This is scalable." And of course, Wow. But yeah, I forgot about to ask this. Now I asked that path, and I asked this like this kind of evolution, how it got bigger. But Bruce, did you always know you were gonna get into podcasts? What were the childhood experience like as a child, and what were the pivotal moments there?
Well, okay, so now that you put it that way, this is a true story. When I was a kid, and now I'm going to kind of give away my age, but I was living at a time when tape recorders were a thing. And so you would have, your tape recorder that was maybe like a foot long
Mm-hmm.
by what, maybe 6 inches wide, and the microphone that plugs into it. And I was such a huge sports fan that from
Mm-hmm.
time to time, I would sit with the tape recorder and I would hold the microphone up to the television because I wanted to record the audio from the TV
Wow,
broadcast of the hockey
that is
games.
very wow.
And
That's a
then we would kind of
throwback.
start, yeah, we would play around a little bit. We'd have some fun. We were
Uh-huh.
watching the television show Happy Days, and
Mm.
so we would do our own version of Wow, the WOW, the Wow radio station.
Wow.
And so that was kind of,
Wow.
I would kind of playfully do, sports broadcasting play by play like an
Mhm.
armchair quarterback like anyone else. So perhaps there was a little bit of foreshadowing, but fast forward to once I really started growing Now Hear This Incorporated, and I was it's so the lesson for your audience here is that yes, in a startup situation, when you're in an environment where you're just trying to go for proof of concept and to show yourself that it's sustainable, I was of course only looking in my backyard.
Right.
But then you
Right.
start to see that, okay, this is only going to take me so far. Now, at that time, Joshua,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
only focused on music clients. So that was making the potential client base even smaller. And as I
Oh.
started to spread my wings, I started to hear about this thing called podcasting. And in 2014, I
Oh,
decided
okay.
I'm going to start one. I just didn't know how to. So I took the easy way, which is I just
Wow.
went to a recording studio and said,
Okay.
okay, you know how to record this. This will get me out the door podcasting faster. And my thinking at the time was
Mhm. Mhm.
by doing this, maybe some person will be listening in whatever,
Right.
Minneapolis, Minnesota, and say, this Bruce guy sounds like he knows my stuff. I wonder if he can manage and promote me from across the miles. And
Wow.
as you and I both know, podcasting has turned into so much more that's changed a whole lot over my 10 plus years of doing my
Wow.
Now Hear This Entertainment podcast.
Oh, wow. I mean, it truly has evolved, but you have been around since before its inception. Bruce, before podcasting was even a thing. Bruce Wozniak was already doing it. Basically, you were already getting, getting your episodes in. You already recording your audios and all that, putting yourself out there. And today, you've hosted 875 podcast episodes over 10 years. How has that impacted your business, your personal brand? What are some memorable connections or opportunities it has brought you? And how did it transform your life, really?
It's really been a huge, huge part of so much that I do professionally because if you go
Mhm.
back to my saying, maybe someone will hear this in insert city here, I'll say San
Mhm.
Antonio, Texas this time, and possibly become a client. What it's actually done is it has opened doors for me to people who I otherwise would have no business getting anywhere near. They would have never answered my phone calls. They would have never answered my emails. They would have never had a meeting with me. But now, because podcasting has emerged to where it has, I can
Mhm.
all of a sudden get these great guests on my show. And then what I do, Joshua, is I kind of turn and say, okay, is there a way that this can be a fit for one of my clients? So if a
Mhm.
client all of a sudden says, hey, I don't even know for example, there's a client I had, she was in Hollywood, she was a dancer first and a singer second. So she didn't
Right.
even know how to songwrite. And so I
Mhm.
went through that mental Rolodex of what guests have I interviewed that I think would be willing to take her on and teach her about songwriting. I just
Oh.
spoke to someone a couple of weeks ago. We were doing a Google Meet session and said they weren't really happy with the producer that they've been using. They really want to find somebody else. I listened to them. I wanted to hear kind of what their goals and objectives were. And again, the light bulb goes on of I know which podcast guest can help this person. And so in that case, I don't feel as though I'm going to these podcast guests with my hand out that I'm looking for something. I'm in a way kind of giving them business because
Mhm.
I'm making these introductions, these connections for them. So it has changed so much. There's a presentation that I do when I go out and speak, right? So
Okay.
that's another way to answer your question that it's helped my brand. is
Mhm.
because now it has enabled me to become a speaker. You mentioned when you introduced me that there was an ebook series that was born out of my podcast. So what I say in this presentation is that I started off as just Bruce Wozniak business owner, which there's nothing wrong with that. But all of a
Okay.
sudden you launch a podcast and now you're Bruce Wozniak business owner and podcaster. Well, then I launched
Ah,
this ebook series out of my podcaster and I become business owner, podcaster, and author. And all of that all of a sudden starts to create demand. So now you become business owner, podcaster, author, and speaker. So it's
wow.
opened so many doors for me, so many doors.
Wow. Bruce, may I just say that that actually also resonates with me, and of course what the whole podcasting thing, because here's the thing, Bruce, you've been a giant, a titan right now. You've been around the game for so long with podcasting. I'm just starting off, and I would, that's why I'm quite excited to get your insights in this. But being new and just starting off already, I already feel the number of opportunities that it has opened up, and the everything. It's just, you get to meet interesting people, you get to meet well connected people, and you just get to talk about all about these interesting stuff. And for in your particular case, Bruce, you are running a successful PR agency, and podcast requires a unique set of skills and insights as well. I mean, I feel like I think anyone can learn to be a podcaster. Anyone can have a podcast, but an effective podcast would be different. I would say, first off, combining both things now, Bruce Wozniak, the business owner, Bruce Wozniak, the podcast host, Bruce Wozniak, the the promoter, so to speak, right? The public promoter and all that. What are some key lessons you've learned along the way of putting this together about growing and sustaining a business, especially in a competitive communications industry? Because podcast is new, or it evolved rather in the way it did evolve in your experience. How did you keep up, and what were the things that you learned along the way?
Number one, I want to say that one little tip is as you develop as a podcaster, you do want to keep that eye on your business. So, because I was serving the music community so
Mhm.
much,
Mhm.
there were questions that I had about the music business. So you can still establish your expertise and
Interesting.
talk about the things that you've done with your clients, but you can
Mhm.
get your own questions answered. So now you have these qualified people who are thriving in an entertainment career, and you can ask them the question that selfishly you're asking it for your own sake. Yes, you
Right.
pass it off as though I know my audience would like to know, but you
Mhm.
get to learn those lessons. So then to further that and to answer your question, this develops to the point where you say, okay, this is turning into a business in and of itself, so to speak. Everybody wants to know, well, how do you monetize your podcast? And that's a whole separate conversation. But
Yeah. Hmm.
I would argue that haven't the people that I met resulted in opportunities for my clients, which keeps them happy, which keeps them on my client roster.
Right.
But then
Right.
all of a sudden, I do start to take a step back and say, okay, is there somebody that I feel a particular connection with that
Okay.
I really
Okay.
want to let them know about my publicist services? Is there
Mhm.
somebody that for some reason strikes me as this would be a good fit as a Now Hear This client? Now, then it starts getting into lessons learned, which have nothing to do with podcasting. One of the biggest lessons that I would share with your audience, Joshua,
Mhm.
is there are so many times in the business world where you hear people give out the advice, think about what you think you're worth, what you would charge people, and then double it. And I'm here to tell you that that's really good advice because starting
Wow.
out, when everything is new to you, you try to find out what the market will bear,
Yes.
but you
Yes.
underprice yourself, you undervalue
Of course.
yourself.
Of course.
And so the more and more you go, and there's also something to be said for perception is reality. So when you start to travel in the circles that I'm in, and you're in
Mhm.
Nashville, you're in Los Angeles, you're in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
people hold you in a high regard and they see what you've done. And if you all of a sudden come along and say, so if you're interested in becoming a client of Now Hear This, and then you lowball them some price, they're going to go, wow, I guess this guy isn't who I thought he is. And look at what
Ooh.
that just did to your brand reputation. So that's
Right.
that's
There you go.
huge.
Wow. Okay. So it's also kind of being protective of your, or rather more aware. of what you are, because now you're communicating, right? You're opening doors, making all these new connections with each other. Just being careful of the connections that you make, the guests that you connect with, what kind of connections you develop with them as well. And of course, with 875 guests and over podcast episodes, Bruce, this is something I just want to share personally. My goal this year alone is actually 500 episodes. What do you think of that? And what do you think? Is it doable? Is it something I should be targeting? It's like, would you do that yourself? Looking back.
I love that goal because in that same presentation I was talking about that I do when I go out as a speaker is I
Hmm.
tell people, if you're going to start a podcast, go into it knowing you're making a long-term time investment. Don't go into it and say, I'm going to try this for 6 months and see how it goes, because you're already giving yourself an
There you
out.
go.
So I
There you
love in
go.
your case, if you say, I'm going to do 500, well, now you have a goal that you can't take time off and you can't say, oh, well, I'm not going to hit 500. Well, how do you know? Look at the calendar. You got plenty of time. You can do the math. So I love that. I love that. I'm going to say congratulations, because
Wow.
setting that goal is half the battle. If you otherwise are
Half
just
the
very
battle.
whimsical about it and say, someday I'll have a good number of episodes. Well, what's a good number? So to
I
put
love
to
that.
put a value on it and say I'm going to do 500, now you have a target that you're going to work
Wow.
towards, and it's only going to make you a better podcaster as you go
Wow.
along, because you're going to get that many more reps that much sooner.
Wow, I love that, Bruce. And of course, I love exercises to work out myself. I love that you call it reps. So yes, I will treat it as getting my reps in, and it's so common too, right? Like every mother, brother, neighbor, neighbor's dog and cousin, they all have podcasts these days. Everyone has a podcast these days. Everyone can talk about anything, but it's one thing to run a podcast. It's another thing to like maintain it. It's another thing to keep it going. I love how you said that you're going to do this, you go all in, and you know what it is that you're going to do, because, towards the end, you're just going to feel like, maybe, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. And that truly is the nature of podcasting, is it not?
Yeah, and the thing of it is that, there's such a level that you are in full control of setting. If you
Mhm.
do take time off from your podcast, if you do sound disinterested on your own podcast, if you
Yes,
don't sound like you're trying to establish your expertise, people
yes.
aren't going to hold you, and your business, now it's
Mm,
affecting your business in the
mm.
regard that you want them to. I have
Yes,
sat
yes.
in Roy Orbison Jr.'s house and had lunch with him. I have sat in a room with, there's a drummer who he has played for everybody. He's played for Kenny Chesney. The list is so long. And he is married to someone who was one of the singers behind Joe Walsh. And she introduces me around as, this is Bruce Wozniak. He has Now Hear This Entertainment. So she's saying the podcast name, but she knows what I do. And
Mm.
admittedly, it does get a little confusing that Now Hear This Incorporated is the agency, Now Hear This Entertainment is the podcast. But
Right,
she, in
right.
other words, is confident enough. She sees the work I'm doing. She listens to the podcast. She knows the quality, and she's happy at her level, right? Because now her reputation is at stake if she's introducing me around. But she's confident to say, this is what Bruce does. He's a great
Fascinating.
guy. And people look at the whole
Fa-
package and they go, okay, awesome. Tell me more.
Wow, wow. And it builds reputation, like you said earlier, especially with the connections that we make. And if you go all in, it builds that authority, it builds trust first and foremost. And I think that at the very bottom line of it, if we really are genuine in what we do, and people feel that, people see that enthusiasm, it builds trust, and people will remember you a lot more. And you've made me feel a lot better about my 500 episodes
Good,
goal this
good.
year, Bruce. Now you've taken this further, and especially with the experience that you have. You're now doing public speaking as well, and you're doing some outreach. Your role as a national speaker has taken you across the U.S., even to the UK. You now have public speaking complemented your work in your PR and your podcasting. What advice do you have for professionals looking to expand their visibility through public speaking? But also, maybe we can relate this a little bit about podcasting as well, in particular, since this is our niche right now. What advice
Yeah,
would you give us?
I think, Joshua, that you really do have to look at both of those environments, podcasting and speaking, as a place where you really want to cement your expertise.
Mm,
Someone someone could be looking at starting up a podcast and say, never mind, I'm not going to do it. There's 16 other people that I found that are already podcasting about the same topic. Well, you have something unique to say. You have a different upbringing, you have a different experience, you have a different skill set. So you still have something different to say than those other 16 people. So do your show anyways. And then similarly, when you go out as a speaker, people want to hear what you have to say because of those very qualities that I just talked about. So you do have to be confident in yourself and say, I wouldn't be doing the show and I wouldn't be putting myself out there as a speaker if I didn't feel I had something to contribute. Now, there's a whole separate conversation about, am I an inspirational / motivational speaker, or am I educational? So some of the podcast,
Wow.
or excuse me, some of the speaking I do is teaching people about podcasting, but
Right.
it's because, as you said, I've been doing it for more than 10 years. So I have a lot to say about the topic.
Of course, and it's also again, it was a natural. I feel like it's a natural transition as well, right? Podcasting and being in PR and promotions, of course, and having all that experience. But I feel like naturally, even without the background that you have, it's a natural transition from podcasting and promotions and going into, say, talking about going into public speaking, so to speak, right? So I think it's great. It's also another goal of mine, actually. Like I want to eventually get up there, talk about podcasts as well. And talk about the what I've learned and how I can help people start their own podcast. It's great. It's a great. It's fun. It's a great story to tell. It's a great way to tell stories.
Well, the other side of it is you do get a stage, then literally a stage, to be a promoter. So don't think that when I'm talking about podcasting, I'm not slipping in several mentions of
Of
my
course.
podcast by name so that people will
Yes.
go look it up. And you can also drop subtle hints about what your business is, provided that it makes some sense in the context of what you're talking about. And a light bulb might go on with someone in the audience who, in my case, might say, oh, he's actually a publicist. I actually need to talk to this guy then. So they may not have an
Interesting.
interest in podcasting, but because I slipped in a mention of what Now Hear This Inc. does, now all of a sudden there's lead gen happening.
There you go. That is the promoter in you, Bruce, the veteran, the guy, the titan of the promotion industry. Of course, little subtle hints in there, sprinkling it all around in there. So making sure it stays in the minds of people. I love that. So definitely, once I get that ball rolling, I will keep that in mind and make sure, you know, uh, hopefully anytime soon, someday soon. I'm looking within the next few months. I start getting that my first public speaking gig talking about podcasting. And I will look back to this episode to look back to the insight that you shared about all that podcasting. Bruce, we are now, when we really, before I really start wrapping this up, this is something I want to make sure I ask you because like you said, you've been there since the iteration of podcast before podcast even was a thing, right? And it has evolved, it has changed throughout the time. Now we are talking about the modern way or the modern methods of promoting yourself. um on one part, I would say that it's not lead gen, but it's also lead gen. But another part is also a great way to put yourself out there, put content out there, establish yourself as authority and trust. We talk about that. How do you see now the future or the current present of how podcasting is so much more different on a promotion perspective than it was before way back? And also, how do you see it in the future moving forward?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is people who 10 years ago, when I first started, were just trying to figure out what is this thing. And I guess I just talk into the mic, and it was really conversational then. I'm not here to say that it's not conversational anymore because
Mhm,
here I am, somebody that does interview podcasts. At the same time, I
mhm,
think it has become more promotional. And this time I will say, in the monetization sense, of people saying, I need to interject my business into this, and or I need to sell ads into it or mention my affiliate links.
mhm,
Sometimes, in my opinion, it gets to be a little much. At the same time, congratulations to those people who have so many sponsors that it does get to be a little much. I think what
mhm.
we're going to see in the future is that the audience is going to dictate what they're willing to tolerate.
There
And
you go.
we as podcasters can see that in our stats in so many ways. And that's been one of the nice trends that I've seen is the hosting companies keeping up and giving us that back end information and showing the drop off point where the listener stops listening.
Mm,
Or we
mm,
can do surveys and have people interact with us and say, I really wish that you would do less of this, or I love when you do this, I wish you would do it more.
I
So
love that.
with the way that apps are being developed and there are so many features being built in, I think it's
Mhm,
going to become so audience driven that we're not going to have to figure out, does my audience like this? They're going to tell us, and it might mean a shift in our shows being shorter, our shows being longer,
mhm.
adjustments that could be made thanks to, and I know people think there's too many apps out there. I would disagree with that. If I find out that Now Hear This Entertainment is on some podcast player that I never heard of, I'm thrilled. Someone's going to
Yes.
find it on there, and then hopefully they'll give me some feedback.
That's it. That's it right there. I truly agree on all of that, and we are the new frontier of podcasting, so to speak. Especially with the apps, the online aspect of it. We're much more. Back then, probably you're talking. When you get onto podcasts, you're just limited to radio, right? And the audience is going to be limited, and rather the host or the number of people that can do it, it's also going to be limited, and that has opened up an opportunity for us today in this modern time and age that you know eh, the door's open for everyone basically. Bruce, how
Absolutely,
about you?
absolutely. Yeah, it's such a low barrier of entry.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but I think the cream will rise to the top. And because it
Oh,
is so
I love that.
easy, people get in and they find out 5, 6, 7 episodes in, this isn't for me, and they
It's
fall
so
off.
hard. It's so hard. It's difficult. I mean, I don't have to tell you this, right? It's so difficult to just put everything together. It's one thing to speak into the mic, have that conversation. Most people, I believe, feel like it ends there. Like, oh, I can have a conversation. I can tell stories. We are all great storytellers. It's literally in our DNA. But it's the thing that comes after that, right? The editing, the promotions, putting it all together. Even the posting alone takes a lot of time, right? So it's an undertaking that you really have to get your mindset into. But again, thanks to the opportunities that's being presented, the entry, the I love how you said that the barrier of
It's a
entry
low
has
barrier of
lowered.
entry.
Yeah, it has lowered, but the cream will rise to the top eventually. I love that. Bruce, to really start bringing this home, how about you? What is your future aspirations? Your personal aspirations, maybe outside podcasting, or how do you see yourself in the future in PR and promotions? And, you know, what is the future for Bruce Wozniak?
Well, I'll tell you, I have no plans of ceasing podcasting anytime soon. And I think what it does for Now Hear This Incorporated is
Mhm.
it gives me kind of an inside track as to the value of podcasting. And I don't hesitate, I don't do it regularly because
Right.
it's not for everybody, but I don't hesitate to encourage my clients. Maybe we should consider seeing if a podcast is for you. Or I will
Oh,
tease it and say, maybe we should have you record an audio series. Let's
all
put some
right.
files up on your website. Let's tell people that they're there and get you kind of comfortable behind a microphone. But I don't see myself stopping this anytime soon because I still enjoy it so much, first and foremost.
Right.
But then, yes, as I've
That's it.
said, the business benefits have been so many that
Mm.
I really don't know, Joshua, in all honesty, what's going to happen that's going to tell me it's time to stop. And as we do continue to grow in the medium, and
Mm.
as I do continue to, been very fortunate to have clients all throughout the United States. So I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to find something new through podcasting that's going to serve them even better than it currently is.
Mm.
And everything is just going to continue to grow.
Wow. 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 And that's it. If there's no reason to stop, why not? I mean, if you enjoy it, we enjoy it. I love what I do. You certainly love what you do, of course. I'm for 10 years, I mean, Bruce, right? Of course you do. And, I'm just really glad that I got to pick your brains a little bit today. And I'm glad that you shared all that insight with us. I want to leave everyone with a brief message that you also left us across the world. The advice that you've heard about: think about what you'd like to change and then double. Double it is in fact correct. That is the truth. think about what you'd like to change, and then double it. How do you feel like that applies in podcasting, Bruce?
Well, I think when people get into podcasting, they unfortunately make the mistake of thinking, how can I monetize this? And then reality sets in and they see that it's not going to happen anytime soon. But I think in that case, Joshua, it's actually the reverse. Instead of thinking what you want to charge and doubling it, I think they shoot too high. And you have to realize that if you don't have any sponsors, there's no perceived value at the time. So if you
Right.
come out with this exorbitant price to a sponsor who says, well, you don't even have any sponsors yet, you'd probably be thrilled to get me. I'll give you half of what you just quoted me. I think that's the exception to the rule right there. So I think what you do is you get yourself some income for the sake of getting some sponsors, and you say,
That's
okay,
it.
then I can start charging more. But you start
That's
off a
it.
little bit on the lower side so that you get some extra money in your pocket and you can feel better that, okay, people are interested in sponsoring this. And then you grow it together. Okay, so it's not a money
That's it.
grab. It's you got to
That's it.
stay in touch with that sponsor and you got to
Mhm.
work hand in hand so that they're happy and they renew, and then eventually you raise your rates.
I love it. I love it. Bruce, again, thank you so much. These are insights, of course, that can only come from someone who's been in the game a long, long time. A true veteran, a true titan of the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this topic as much as I did. I mean, it's quite obvious, right? Bruce, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Joshua. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. And to all our audience and listeners out there, see you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.